Hello, everybody. I'm Franz. This is the Town Hall for Concrete CMS, March 2026. Pretty light news month this month. We're going to do some quick thank yous, quickly talk about some court releases, do a site in the wild. But I did want to just briefly talk about Concrete version 8. We first started talking about end of life many years ago, back in 2022, I believe, was the first, hey, this isn't going to go on forever kind of announcements. And we have pointed out many times over the years, look, we're going to do security updates as we can, but you really should be migrating to version 9. And that has become very much true this month. Andy's going to get into the release that we just made. There are some small security updates, nothing that, is a big existential threat that I think you should be, running around with your head cut off for. But some things I would like to fix, and it just doesn't make sense to keep porting those back to version 8. So if you are still running version 8 or earlier with your Concrete site, you should really find a way to upgrade. There are people in the forums that can help. We can help. All you got to do is reach out, and sure, somebody can come up with a plan that fits your timeline and budget. But that is it. No more updates to version 8, period. So we all know it's coming, and here we are. That said, let's check in with Andy and see what else is going on.
Hey everybody, it's Andrew here with the March 2026 Concrete News Updates. This month we have 2 releases for you to check out. We have a new point release for 9.4, 9.4.8, and we have a new release candidate for 9.5.0. So definitely, if you're thinking of upgrading your site to the latest and greatest pretty soon, definitely kick the tires on 9.5.0 if you can on an upgraded stage or something like that. Not too many no new features in this release candidate. Usually try not to do that. But we have added some dependency updates with the eye toward getting 9.5 able to be run on PHP versions up to 8.5. So in doing so, we've upgraded some dependencies. We've swapped some things out. So definitely check that out if you're thinking of upgrading to 9.5 when it becomes fully available. And let us know if you encounter any roadblocks, and let us know what you think. Also, with 9.4.8, this is a pretty small release. It does have some security updates, nothing major to report, but there are some small things there. So definitely upgrade your production sites to 9.4.8 if you're running 9.4. And as always, let us know what you think. Thank you to our community for all that you do. We could not be here without you. In GitHub this month, we have activity from Kruglis, Morier, D. Burer, John LaFish, Rich Rawlings, Biplobice, Ilanbite, Cactus Palm, and D. Burer. Thank you to everyone who helps keep Concrete going, and we could not do it without you. Thanks again.
Today I want to show you a quick example of a real site built with Concrete CMS. This site is Watashi Life, pronounced Watashi, which means I or me in Japanese. This site is built with Concrete, and it's also hosted on our SaaS platform, so the team gets full experience, including the infrastructure, all the security updates, and manage hosting all together in one. So first we'll scroll down here on the home page. And you can see editors can update the content here. They're pushing blocks in. They use quite a few different blocks here. Looks great. So they can just click edit and change any of these headings or change out any of the images as they see. And oh, look at this cute little kitty. Every site needs a cute little kitty. Let me see here. Oh, here we go. We got a nice FAQ section here using our FAQ block. Let's take a look at testimonial block, so editors can put their quote in right here. They can add an image and then put in the person's name, and this all formats in these cute little boxes right for you. Let's take a look at the blog page. This is a nice looking blog layout, and you can see some blog posts here that look really great. Another great thing about this site is it's multilingual, so you can choose Japanese if you want the site to be in Japanese. Back to English we go. And to wrap up, so this is the Watashi Life built and hosted on Concrete CMS. It's a great example of how Concrete CMS combines flexible design, structured content blocks, and is a great example of how multilingual and simple editing tools for content teams. And of course, it also proves that every website is better with a tiny mascot of a kitty guarding the FAQ section. Thank you, everyone.
Hey everyone, I wanted to share some thoughts on some forum post that I saw that piqued my interest and I think is really quite relevant to what's going on in the wider world of development today. And the post in question is proposal, community maintains skills for coding agents in the Concrete CMS ecosystem. And this is from Hishi. It's basically, the request here is that, LLMs and coding agents use kind of structured text-based markdown files to kind of describe standard practices around a particular language. And so when you ask them to do something, they can refer to something as opposed to just looking at the entire swath of knowledge they have about concrete. So for example, here, his particular repo has, it basically looks like it's like a very lightweight section, concrete developer documentation. So each one of these things has a skill markdown file that goes through talking about how to build a theme, things like that. And then there's further references and things for each sort of thing. And his rationalization for why we would want this is there's a lot of understanding of the core concrete code, and I can attest to this when I've used coding in concrete through ChatGPT or through OpenAI's Codex. It will get a lot of things right, but he is right. The vast majority of code in that an LLM would have access to would be the core code. But there's a lot of, that's not actually what developers are using when they're working on most of their projects. They're working with packages, and there's a lot less package code, or at the very least, there's a lot less package code with lots of examples about how it's used and which approaches in those packages are best. We do try to have a lot of documentation, and I'm sure LLMs are trained on our docs as well as our code, but it is true that also doesn't always get the current picture of Concrete CMS, which is kind of vital. We've got documentation that goes back 15 years, which is interesting from an anthropological perspective, but not necessarily interesting when you're asking an LLM to build you something for version 9.5 or version 10 when it comes out. So his thought is, can we take something like this? Can we get it into the Concrete CMS organization? Could we put it in the core? He doesn't actually advocate for this, and I agree. Yeah, I think we should absolutely put something like this in. Probably, we have the Concrete CMS community organization, which is sort of cool, it's sort of a laundry list of all sorts of projects that use concrete in many different ways, maintained by many different people. And then there's the Concrete CMS organization, which houses the core, which houses Bedrock, and all of the sort of first-party things that we maintain and keep going. And I think this makes a lot of sense to put in the Concrete CMS organization. Just put it right up at the top. Going through this, it seems very useful in terms of like looking at, this is not what I want. If I look into the actual repo here and go into something like building packages, it just kind of goes through what you would need to do when you'd want to do that, and sort of the best practices for doing that. And what's, you don't have to go into great detail because these are LLMs, but it is helpful to give them some context when starting to work with stuff. So definitely, yeah, we'd be happy to talk further about moving this into the main repository or the main GitHub organization. And then beyond that, there are some actual questions in this thread that I kind of wanted to address. Masuba here wants to know, what about working with an LLM and concrete is it could be better. And it's interesting. I definitely agree with his initial post, which is to use existing code examples when working on something. So for example, if you can point to a working implementation of something, like say a dashboard search interface for something that exists, like nothing too crazily complex like the file manager, but something sort of custom in a package that exists already. And then you say, well, I've got this entity, it's being searched here. It has all these advanced search fields, this kind of stuff here. This entire dashboard section is dedicated to searching this list of stuff. I've got another entity of stuff that I want to search. So if you're building an e-commerce platform, you've got products, it's actually working. It's presumably not too complex and rat's nested at this point. You say, I've got orders now. This is my order doctrine entity. And that's my product doctrine entity. I've already got the product search. Build me an order search. Enable advanced searching by the following fields, this, that, and the other. And, having tested out OpenAI's Codex on something like this, it did a pretty good job of this. Obviously, there's some crazy stuff going on, and you're not going to ever want to put any of this stuff into production without fully testing this. You can have my guarantee that nothing in Concrete is vibe coded. Anything like that, that's the furthest from how we do business here. But that being said, it is definitely a time saver. And if you can point to existing implementations of stuff, it will make your life a lot easier. She responds with some things like AI agents don't know how to build a block type that has repeatable fields. It's a fair point. There's been a million implementations of this over the years because we don't, for example, we've got some blocks like the image slider that uses its own kind of weird underscore based templating. I think it's underscore to do repeatable fields. And then we've got a newer block like the accordion, which has its own entities, but uses view. I would 100% advocate for the view approach. So what I would do in that situation is if I were building a custom block type, I would say, build me my, hover card block that lets me add one-to-many cards with, name, description, whatever, and use the accordion block in the core as your inspiration, or if I were describing this task to an LLM, and you're definitely going to get better results. So no, you can't just sort of, these things are only as smart as we are good at explaining ourselves. And it's like, you would never work with a junior developer and have them, and you would just say, build me a block that does this, go, you have 3 days. Like you would, you might not like the results that you get back. What you probably want to do is be a little more judicious about it, exercise some better judgment and say, look, here's an example of something that works very similarly to what we have today, but it's what we're doing has a different data structure, has a couple more fields, has some different options. So start here, fork this. I never start any code from scratch anymore, and I never did before LLMs either. I always started from a starting point of something that was kind of like what I was going to be building. And I don't see working with AI as any different than that. It just works a lot faster and you can iterate on it. But that means it can also go off the rails a lot more quickly. So you still have to exercise good judgment, but definitely work from a known good starting point. And I think you'll like what you get. And with all that said, yeah, let's talk further about getting this into our organization, and we can keep building cool stuff together. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, everybody, that is all we've got for this month. Thank you so much for choosing Concrete to build cool stuff with. We always look forward to seeing what you're making, and we will check in next month. Thanks.